Assume that we're interested in whether there is any correlation between the percentage of the population below the poverty line, per capita income, and rates of obesity for the various states. We'll first create a visualization for 2018 and then repeat the process for 2019 and 2020. As it turns out, we have almost no chronic disease data for 2021. We'll first create a visualization that shows the relationship between the percentage of people below the poverty line and rate of obesity by state. So I'm going to start by dragging location description into the sheet, and it'll become clear later on why I used location description. And then, because we're interested in the 2018 data, I then drag the 2018 percentage of people below the poverty line into the column shell. So we have this first part of the visualization. You see the three nulls at the bottom here. We'll deal with that in a little bit. The next step is to add data from the chronic disease table. But since we're only interested in obesity, I'm going to drag questions into the filter shelf. And you see we get the option to select or deselect all of the variables, the questions, the variables that you like, that we have data for. They are in alphabetical order. And since I'm interested in obesity, I'm going to select obesity among adults aged 18 years or over. Click that in here and then drag data value in here too. Now, if you mouse over any of the data values for the chronic disease data, you'll see that the values are very, very high. And we can't solve this by changing the aggregation method at this stage, at least, to average, because that would give us the average for all of the years that we have data for, chronic disease data for. And in any case, we're only interested in the 2018 data. So we're going to put another filter on the year start. Since year start is a numerical value, you'll see that it looks slightly different. We have a slider. So we can have either slide left and right, or we can just type 2018 in here. And then click OK. And you see that the values become lower, but the values are still fairly high. But now we can solve it because we only have the 2018 data. We can solve it by setting the aggregation method to average. And now we have something that looks better. Since we're interested in the correlation between a number of variables, we now have to change the chart, and we do that from the show me, and we make it a scatter plot because scatter plots are good to visualize correlations between variables. Let me get rid of the show me pane. So we now have a scatter plot, and we can make a few enhancements to this graph to make it more user-friendly. The first one is to make sure that we know what each of the bubbles corresponds to. So I'm going to drag location description on the label card, and you now see we get the labels on the various bubbles. And if I mouse over them, then one of them, you see we get two different data points for each of these states. Now, we can, in general, Tableau is fairly good in associating labels with these bubbles. For example, by default, it won't allow labels to overlap, but we could override that, but this is just too busy and doesn't really help, so we're not going to do that. The second enhancement you want to make is to the information on the x-axis and the y-axis. So this one says average data value. What we really want to have there is something like health measure. So right click on this one, and that brings up the edit axis. One of the options you get is edit axis. We're going to edit the axis. And you see you have a number of options here. You can, for example, fix the scale on the axis, make it fixed. We're not going to do that. All we're going to do, you can reverse it, you can make it logarithmic. All we're going to do is change the title, health measure, click on this, and you see it has now changed to health measure. We can do something similar here, so we can edit this and make this percentage of, say, individuals below the poverty line. And then the final thing we're going to do at this stage is clean things up. So we're going to make this 2018, and then we're going to change the title to 2018 correlation between health and economic measure. Okay. Now, in addition to changing how the labels are displayed, you can also change the shape if you want. So, for example, you can make all these bubbles stars. I just prefer to keep them as circles, but maybe closed circles. But let's just keep them as open circles for the time being. The scatter plot now shows the correlation, as I said, between obesity rates and the percentage of individuals below the poverty line. But we also want to bring in per capita income. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2018 per capita income and drag that onto the size card. And you now see that the bubbles change. If I move over a bubble, I get 3 data points rather than just 2 data points. And I also have a new legend on the left. Now, the fact that the size of the bubbles now could have meaning as well, makes this a bubble chart rather than just a scatter plot. And it's important to distinguish this bubble chart from a back bubble chart, like this option here, okay? And back bubble charts are good if you want to, for example, show the relative size of some measures without having to use an X or Y axis. So here's an example. Suppose that I want to show the, say, per capita income by state. Okay, if I now make this a packed bubble chart, see that the size of these things now shows me the size of the per capita income. And I can make this a little bit nicer by adding color to it. Okay, now obviously this is not particularly useful in this case because the difference in values between the different states for per capita income is not that high, and a bar chart is therefore the better way of doing it. Okay. Anyway, let's go back to our original bubble chart. One of the things we may want to change here is change the legend on the title on the legend. It now, at the moment, is sum 2018 per capita income, the same label as we have on the pill. But since we already have 2018 here, we can just make this per capita income. Okay, that makes it look a little nicer. There's still the issue of the 3 nulls. Well, that arises because we have a number of locations in the location description that are not states. So when you go through it, you see, for example, that it includes Guam, the United States, and the Virgin Islands. But we might as well get rid of the District of Columbia, because that's not officially a state, or Puerto Rico. because that's not the state either. So we do OK. You see the nulls have disappeared, but you also see that the scale has changed on the y-axis, because now the state with the highest percentage of population in poverty is Mississippi, whereas it used to be Puerto Rico. One more thing we want to do, since we want to use this filter on location description for all of the other visualization we're going to create, I'm going to click on the location description pill in the filter shelf, select apply to worksheets, and then I say all using this data source. And now when I drag, for example, location description into a new visualization, you'll see that places like Guam, the District of Columbia, or the United States or the Virgin Islands are no longer part of the list of locations. I'm going to create similar visualizations for 1919 and 2020, but I'll do that offline.